Hey guys, and welcome to an analysis of modern tactical shooters in 2016. So the first title I'd like to talk about is Rainbow Six Siege. And I'll preface this by saying I don't own the game, haven't played it, just seen a lot of reviews. And I remember when I saw the first gameplay footage of it, I was pretty disappointed. I remember being excited about the game, and in the back of my mind I went, I hope they don't Call of Duty it or make it like all the other modern shooters out there. But sadly, watching the gameplay trailers and things like that, and it's exactly like a close quarters Call of Duty style game. It's still very slow paced from what it seems, from what the videos depict, but it's got definitely some of those modern arcade-ish elements in there. So this is a video by a channel called Worthabuy, a guy named Mac. He does some extremely raw, reviews, and he's not afraid to tell you what he thinks of the game. He's an older gamer, so he knows the original Rainbow Six, and he kind of talks about that in this review. And he makes a comparison that this is really not like a Rainbow Six game. All right, it's still a lot of fun, but it's not something that lives up to the legacy of the original. So let's hear what he has to say.
Of game for that. I want at least everything that the other Rainbow Sixes had, and a hell of a lot more on top of that. Why shouldn't I expect for £50 frickin' pounds? So what do I get for £50? Well, do I get a single player campaign? Of course you don't. No, you don't. Do you know why you don't get a single player campaign? I'll tell you why. Because that would be hard work. In this day and age, that's hard work, and we all know how sloppy developers are now, and they just kind of sit there, stretching in the chair. Are we going to do a single-player campaign for this game? Are we doing that? Excuse me, are we doing a single-player campaign for Rainbow Six Siege? I can't remember. We're not. Why is that? They've all had in the past single-player. It's £50, you know. And we're not doing it? F*** them. But they'll still buy it anyway. Okay. F*** them. No, F*** them. It says F*** them, we're not doing it. You see, that's how I envisage things go on in the offices, guys. You have to really program the AI. You've got to have a bit of a story going down homes. You've got to have missions in a methodical order. You've got to have a lot of work.
He's just talking about, in order to do a single player campaign, it does take a lot of work, and you have to program some believable AI. You have to program a storyline that's convincing in there, and all these points are valid. So looking at Rainbow Six Siege, this was supposed to be a return to the roots of what Tom Clancy had envisioned and delivered in the first series, with some glitches and things like that. But the foundation of what Rainbow Six was and what a tactical shooter was there. So I think of games like Delta Force, Rainbow Six Original, the Ghost Recon Classic, the original. And there's a list of things that I'll get into later on in the video about what I believe makes a tactical shooter great. Now, I know I did my top 4, which were storyline, artificial intelligence, smoothness of controls, and graphics, but we're going to expand on that list. And a lot of times we use the term hardcore tactical shooter. Well, what does it mean to be hardcore? How do we define that? So hopefully I'll give us some language for how we can do that.
You have to be extra careful. I'm very disappointed at the AI in this. Really, there's kind of game modes where you have to kill all the enemies, rescue a hostage, defend a hostage, defuse a bomb, but there's not really much more, and it just kind of rinses and repeats. Sometimes you're attacking, sometimes you're defending, and each operative has different abilities. And there's your game, guys, for £50, and I have to say, it's not worth it. And it's not really a Rainbow Six game. It just doesn't. It's nothing like the Rainbow Six games that made the name Rainbow Six. It's kind of like a Battlefront. They've used the name Battlefront, but it was nothing like Battlefront. And this is using the Rainbow Six name, but it's nothing like a Rainbow Six game. If you grew up on Rainbow Six 1, 2, and 3, and even Vegas, you're going to be disappointed with this because it's been Call of Duty'd, I'm afraid.
Alright guys, so then he goes on to say just how it is a lot of fun in co-op, but it really has nothing to do in the sense with the original Rainbow Six series, other than, you know, maybe the Elite Counterterrorism International United Nations Coalition, you know, which goes anywhere in the world to fight terrorism, essentially. So you can see here, there's a bunch of stuff on the screen. There you can see your teammates. There's kind of a ghostly outline around teammates, right? And I'm not against having a HUD. I like a compass on the lower right-hand corner there, just like in Ghost Recon. Maybe an ammo count, what kind of weapon you're using, and which one you have selected. A stance indicator. Some of those things aren't bad. You don't really need them. I think even the hardcore tactical community crowd is overly dependent on those. And even if you play ARMA, you can really remove all the HUD elements or even Ghost Recon and still be able to enjoy the experience and probably enjoy it even more. So we're going to get into what we mean by a tactical shooter. Before we do that, we're going to take a look at a YouTube video by the Cynical Brit, and he talks about Medal of Honor Warfighter and his thoughts on that. So let's hear what he has to say.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Total Biscuit. There's a genre I like, it's called FPS. Unfortunately, the genre that I like has been hijacked in the last few years by what I like to call MMS. MMS is modern military shooter, and unfortunately, it has become a very popular genre indeed. Call of Duty belongs in the modern military shooter genre, as does the latest Battlefield.
Alright, so my apologies, it's actually Total Biscuit. I think Cynical Brit is a different channel, but let's hear what he has to say about this.
Linear campaign. Incredibly linear. To the point where it might as well be Dragon's Lair with an occasional bit of point-and-click aiming. Basically, if you don't do what the game wants you to do, let's just ignore the fact that I saw one of those bullets fly through this solid stone pillar, right? If you don't do what the games want you to do, they will punish you. To the point where they might actually murder you horribly for no reason. Now, in this, the second level of Medal of Honor Warfighter, I had the pleasure of running off to the left of our starting location, only to be told that I would be executed in 3 seconds if I didn't get back into the combat zone. I was leaving the combat zone, apparently. Standing where the sniper is actually doesn't really matter so much. I mean, I can approach this location, la-da-da. That's a second sniper hit I've taken, la-da-da-da. You gonna shoot me again? Come on, you're gonna have to do better than that, otherwise my health is gonna regenerate. This guy is a really bad sniper. Da-da-da-da. That's a fourth bullet. How many more bullets can we take? Is my health regenerating faster than he can hit me? It looks like it might be. This guy's the worst sniper of all time. That's 5 bullets, by the way, from a fairly high-caliber sniper rifle. He hasn't reloaded at any point, I should point out. This guy has fired about, what, 20 rounds? 30 maybe? He's just going to keep shooting. He's going to sit there, keep shooting. So, as you can see, I'm very clearly pretty much immune to sniper bullets. That's even 2 in a row there. So that's, what, 8 or 9 sniper hits? Alright. Okay. Now, as you can see, being an elite tier 1 operator, I'm immune to bullets from a sniper rifle. What am I not immune to? Uneven tiled floors! This is what's wrong with modern FPS. This is what is wrong. It's not even an FPS anymore. It is essentially a QuickTime event game. It is basically Dragon's Lair. It is, you must complete all of these objectives which either involve left-clicking, right-clicking, or holding the E button. Sure, wonderful. It will only let you advance if you choose to laze the target, because that's what the storyline dictates. You must laze the target and deal with these incredibly inaccurate snipers with a large amount of pyrotechnics for no apparent reason whatsoever. Let's lock on to that target. Hey, 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 this is some fun gameplay, right? It's alright, I'll just stand here, I don't need cover anyway. And let's see the wonderful pyrotechnic display. Looks nice, doesn't it? It does. You know, it's very impressive graphically. Good sound assets, generally fantastic destruction, and all-around awesome Hollywood special effects. Except that's not what I play games for. I play games and first-person shooters because I want to have an interesting, interactive, and adrenaline-filled experience.
Alright guys, so in the background here we're going to watch some footage from the new upcoming Escape from Tarkov, which a lot of people are excited about. It borrows elements from DayZ, maybe Stalker, and some other titles. It is a survival game, but they want to push the limits of realism in a shooter. And I'll talk to you more about what their plans are. If you haven't heard of this, it's pretty remarkable. Nobody really knows what this is going to be like, and I typically don't like presenting games, but there is a lot of hype and excitement around this. From what I've seen so far, they're setting the bar extremely high for realism. In fact, they're attempting to do something that nobody's done before in a tactical shooter genre. So it's gonna be amazing. Before we do that, let's talk about what a tactical shooter is and what it means to be a hardcore tactical shooter. Pretty much anything on the market could be considered a military shooter or simulation of military activities, even Call of Duty, right? Because it is simulating military operations. But the big difference between something like ARMA 3 or the ARMA series and maybe like Call of Duty is that ARMA aims to get as realistic as possible, whether it's in bullet ballistics, uniforms, trajectories, damage modeling of a player, etc. And at the end of the day, don't forget, ARMA is still a piece of entertainment software. Okay. So in the last series, I talked about the 4 essentials: storyline, artificial intelligence, movement of controls, and graphics was the very last thing. Okay. So I'm going to add to that list and talk about what it means to be a hardcore tactical shooter and how can one of these be successful. Number one is decision making, otherwise known as freedom in a game. All right. There's a reason why DayZ is incredibly popular, and something like, I've read this and I think it's true, 90% of the ARMA 3 servers are things like Altus Life and Epoch and other things like that. Why is that? Why are those so popular? And ARMA, just the baseline ARMA isn't that much so, and there's not a lot of people too excited about the ARMA 3 campaign, even though it's decent. But it all has to do with freedom. DayZ, it's incredible because of the decision making and freedom that the player is allowed to have, and that freedom allows the player to feel somewhat in control of the environment. Okay, you can even extend that analogy to a game like Skyrim or World of Warcraft or any number of open world games. Okay, the original Ghost Recon featured this type of open world decision making. Rainbow Six Original up to 3 allowed the player to choose loadout. I think in Rainbow Six 3 there's something like 65 unique weapons. You could plan your path, command your team in real time like you could in Ghost Recon. You could choose what type of equipment you guys are going to use. If you were going to go suppressed or unsuppressed, if you were going to use hollow point or full metal jacket rounds. And the open world nature of these military titles made them feel free and unrestrained. The player was really in control of decision making and ultimately the success or failure of the mission and the preservation of his team or hostages. All right. In other words, the decisions that you made directly affected the mission. You weren't led down this linear corridor, okay, where the storyteller, the developer, wanted you to make one decision and one decision only, and it's to pull this lever, open this door, or go through here. In Ghost Recon and Rainbow Six Original, the classic versions, you need to complete the mission, you need to fulfill the objectives, but you had the freedom to figure out how to do that. Were you going to hit the back entrance? Were you going to use a sniper rifle that was suppressed and take out patrols that way? Or were you going to do a full frontal assault with 2 teams from 2 different entrances? It was completely up to you. So that's point number 1. Decision making and freedom. Number 2 is actually realism. And again, what do we mean by realism? Well, realistic ballistics, right? The Ground Branch team, which is an up-and-coming tactical shooter, uses the acronym NORG, which stands for New Order of Realistic Gaming, or Natural Order of Realistic Gaming. What that means is allow the real world to dictate the boundaries of the game. So you don't have to come up with artificial balancing of weapons or hit detection or anything like that. Just allow the real world to dictate what happens in the game, and that's something that Escape from Tarkov developers have taken seriously. What they want to do is, let the round caliber cause damage. Depending on what type of round you're using, let the type of firearm they're using determine ballistics. Okay, and then the damage modeling on the body. If somebody gets shot in the head, they're going to be completely incapacitated or dead, right? If they get shot in the leg, they're not going to just be out of the fight. They're going to limp, or maybe they won't be able to walk or something like that. So just allow the real world to kind of dictate that, and that is what realism in a game is. It's allowing the laws of the real world to dictate what happens in game, and that realism creates natural consequences within the simulation. All right, so the last part is consequences. In Rainbow Six Original, for instance, if you used a 9mm MP5, you might have issues actually penetrating body armor, right? Especially if it was hollow point rounds. So you might want to go for a assault rifle, right? Like an M4 or M16 using a 5.56 round with a green tip, and maybe you can penetrate body armor that way. Consequences for cold weather, right? Being that Escape from Tarkov is a survival game, I know there's a popular mod in Skyrim called Frostbite, or I think it's called Frostbite, or Frost, or something like that. And if you go out in the mountains and you're not dressed properly, then you can freeze to death, right? If you don't bring firewood ahead of time, you can freeze to death. So those are some of the consequences in game that, or in real life, that would translate into the game. So how would that work out for a tactical shooter? Maybe if you don't maintain your weapon, if you don't, replace parts when they need to be, if you don't lubricate the weapon or something like that, it could jam up on you more frequently, right? That's on the hardcore extreme of realism. But in Escape from Tarkov, you can actually replace parts. Parts might break on you on a weapon, and you have to find a new one, that type of thing. So consequences for decisions as well. If you decide that you're gonna go in full frontal and there's like 30 dudes on target, right? And they end up killing you and your entire team, well, that's a realistic consequence to, try to engage a target maybe that was too heavily defended, or maybe you didn't use a sniper, Overwatch position or something, and your assault team went right in and you got mowed down in a doorway in the funnel of death or something. Well, that would be a consequence to your decisions. So in other words, point number one is decision-making freedom. Whatever it is that the player decides, all right, if you give the player total freedom in his loadout, in his outfits, right, in his kit, in how he's going to approach the target, then the only person that has responsibility for consequences is that player's decisions. Granted that everything, nothing's glitching out or something like that. So allow the player to make decisions, allow the environment to be realistic, and allow the decision making and the realism in the title create consequences for the player. And those are three things that I think we're really missing in modern shooters. And when you look at Rainbow Six Siege or any number of modern quote-unquote realistic military games, they don't have that. They're very corridored. They don't give you all the weapons up front. You have to earn them with perks and things like that, or maybe you have to buy them. Like in Rainbow Six Siege, I think there's like microtransactions. So a game like ARMA 3, if you give the player freedom, you give the player realism, and then whatever consequences he has, hopefully, will be as a result of his actions, not a result of some artificial gameplay or some linear corridor that he has to go through. So those are the three things that I think tactical shooters need to be successful, in addition to the other points made earlier. So let's take a look at Escape from Tarkov and see what kind of things that they're doing here.
which would cover all possible aspects of weapon handling. Talking about other shooters generally, every weapon has 4 or 5 animations: pull it out, shoot, reload, full or not, and if we're lucky, an idle animation. In our case, however, the very same weapon will need 10 times more animations, with all of them divided into segments and adjusted appropriately for smooth transition of one into another in numerous possible combinations. Moreover, all of them should run smoothly, sharply, and most importantly, not arbitrarily. Eventually, the system grew up to be what we have now. Briefly, just briefly, it's drawing weapon, zeroing, shooting, ejecting magazine, inserting magazine, fast drop of the magazine, ejecting the old mag with the new one in hand, releasing sight stop, if there is one, if there isn't and there is no cartridge in the chamber, cocking the receiver, removing misfired cartridge, removing jamming or stovepipe, switching fire mode controller, weapon idling, and a dozen more animations that are either absent in other games or made rather primitively.
So you can see how much detail they're taking into creating a realistic shooter. You can see it's a true first-person view here. So no legs hanging out in space, much like ARMA, where you can actually see your full body and everything. And then here's the inventory. You can, he's replacing a dust cover right here. You can actually, take it off, and he just put a dust cover on there. This is the AKM. And then he's going to show you a bunch of shooting animations. The amount of animations that they have, they really focus on the character development and character movement, because they said that's where the player focuses his attention, and they really want that to be the most realistic possible. Their goal with Escape from Tarkov is truly to make the most authentic and realistic shooter made. Now, I don't think their goal is as ambitious as ARMA, where you have the combined arms, tanks, helicopters, that type of thing. But from a ground, just ground combat shooting point of view, they're aiming to make the most realistic experience that you can get, and it seems like they're going to accomplish that. So the last point is mods, right? Modifications are important in tactical shooters because it increases the life of the title almost infinitely. When I look at Ghost Recon, which is still being modified today, it's amazing. ARMA is heavily modifiable, not just from the tactical community, but also from people that just want to create a sandbox experience for players, whether it's open city like Altus Life, when you have police and ambulances and criminals, right? It's that sandbox experience. So mods are very important. And just to recap, the state of modern gaming, when we looked at Rainbow Six Siege, right, which was supposed to return to its roots, it was missing a lot of these things that we talked about: decision making and freedom. You're corridored in, you're in these close quarters battle, which I understand that's what the game's about. But in Rainbow Six, you just felt like you had so much more say in how things went, from the pre-planning stage all the way up to the kit that you chose, right? Decision making and freedom. I personally would love to see a tactical shooter where it is open world and it also has some really intricate close quarters battle situations. Ghost Recon kind of touched on that in the beginning, and definitely ARMA touches on that with the new movement dynamics. Number 2, let the shooter be realistic. Let real life create consequences for the player. So consequences should spring from that. And number 4 is modification. If you make the next tactical shooter modifiable, I think it will be extremely successful and it'll continue to live on. So those are my tips for the future of tactical shooters and kind of what they should incorporate. Whether we'll see that or not, only the future will tell. On the horizon right now is Ground Branch, and I hope we can incorporate all of these things. In addition to the original, obviously AI is very important. Your storyline. I remember recently doing a video of Delta Force, and even though the graphics are very, very minimal in that, which are the last on the list, the storyline was incredible. You're traveling all around the world, different environments, different kits, and you are engaging cartel members all the way up to terrorists. Okay, so that was very cool. There's a lot of different missions, and then the artificial intelligence was okay, but it's graphics. I think we overstated. It's certainly not something that if it looks great, it's more believable, of course, but those things are much lower on the list than things like freedom and decision making and artificial intelligence and that type of thing. Alright, so this was an analysis of the current state of tactical shooters in 2016, what we have now, what's on the horizon, and what I personally would like to see in the next series. So hopefully we'll see something like that come out in the future. Thank you guys for watching this video, and thanks for subscribing to the channel. I'll see you guys next time.